What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Madden 19 CFM feature focus. Hope you're all having a good weekend. And today's feature focus is going to focus around skill points and the new progression system. And I don't know about you guys, but this is honestly probably the thing that I'm most excited for when it comes to CFM. If you go all the way back to my first What the Franchise video, you might remember that it had to do with XP, which has been one of the biggest pain points for me over the years when it comes to CFM. The mechanic itself to progress players was extremely cumbersome and tedious, and then the process in which XP was both attained and able to be distributed were both very unrealistic in my opinion. And while skill points isn't perfect and some of those issues with the previous system are going to still remain, which I will get to, I still think this is a pretty good balance, with that balance being between the reason that XP was implemented in the first place, which was to give user control and allow people to progress players their own way and the way they wanted to, and then the older Madden style, which in my opinion was better, where there was more randomness involved and a lot more boom or bust potential despite success. So just to cover exactly what skill points are, they're essentially the new medium when it comes to how you progress players. Rather than earning XP by itself and being able to apply that to any attribute, that XP earned now goes towards acquiring skill points. From there you can distribute them to any one of the player archetypes for that player's position, and when you do that, you're going to be dictating which attributes have potential to be progressed, and you're also guaranteed to raise the archetype for that player by 1 overall. So let's say you have an RB who's a 78 power back and you choose to use his skill point on that. He is now going to become a 79 power back, and the attributes to contribute to that going up are going to be power back related attributes like trucking, break tackle, maybe strength, and it's random, so you're not guaranteed anything outside of that 1 overall. So some skill points might end up being more valuable than others. You don't really know what you're gonna get, and that's one of my favorite parts about this. I love the older Maddens where you get to that end of preseason or the end of season progression, and it basically felt like its own stage where you got to go through your whole roster and see who improved or declined and not really know what was gonna happen up until that point. And I get that same kind of feeling with this system as well. So just to run through some of the positives, convenience is definitely a major one. For me personally, XP became a part of CFM I essentially wanted no part of. I never manually progressed my players, partly because it put me at an advantage over the CPU, and partly because of how cumbersome and time consuming it was to button through menus and upgrade 53 plus guys. That's still going to be there in the sense that you're still going to have to go to each player, but it's much more user friendly, and it's a much more user friendly process, and something that I will definitely be using. And another positive that will contribute to why I will be using it is that a lot of the freedom that the old XP system allowed has kind of been reined in. No longer can you dump your entire bank of XP into one attribute. No longer can you not upgrade awareness for a quarterback to keep his overall low but still make him a great passer, and basically just not have this completely unrealistic change in a player's makeup like you would get before. Like I said before, I think it's a nice compromise between the free-for-all nature that had been in place before and the older, more random and strict model. I also think this is something that should help the CPU as well, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But the reason why I think it could be better is because the AI is now building players off of those archetypes rather than specific attributes. With the old system, the AI would take kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to progression and essentially progress most players the same way, with the only difference being the amount of XP that a player had. With this system, better players are going to become better through their archetype, and you should see more specialty type players or players with just more unique skill sets and more personalized skill sets because of this. But like I said, that will definitely be something to keep an eye on to see if that's actually happening or not. Another big positive is just from a maintenance standpoint. You may have heard me refer to the XP system as a never-ending tuning project, which was another reason that I didn't really like it, because it seemed like every year there would have to be widespread tuning changes to cover up massive holes in what could be done to players, and by reining things in, you're just not going to see the same kind of problems and issues that you saw with the old XP system. That's not to say that there won't be issues, because there will be, there always is, but I think they'll be a lot easier to fix and not nearly as bad or game breaking, to use that term, as they were in the old system. One last thing that's just a positive for me personally with this system is that I will now be able to progress players at the end of the season, and I shouldn't say that I will now be able to, I should say that it makes that method much more viable. I always liked with the older Maddens where players progressed at the end of preseason and at the end of the regular season, or just the regular, or of just the season in general. So I've always tried to replicate that, but as I mentioned earlier, with the way CPU distributes XP to the players, by doing that, it would always throw things off because the CPU would end up dumping all of the players' XP into a trait, or mostly into one attribute. And so progressing every 4 weeks was something that pretty much was required. With this system, however, using the settings to progress players at the end of the season will work a lot better because of the more dynamic progression. You won't be collecting XP, you'll be collecting skill points, and from those skill points you're going to be getting random attributes each time, and so you're not going to see that dump into one attribute or buying unnecessary traits that a player doesn't really need. Getting to the concerns or things that I don't like about it though is going to go back to what I mentioned earlier about some of the old systems issues still hanging around. A large part of what is going to dictate how XP is accrued is still going to be performance, and in the blog it talks about that you're still going to be gaining XP from things like awards and gameplay. And while I know that the amount of XP that you're going to be getting from awards has been reduced, it's still something that seems backwards to me. And I like that the scheme fit applies to training, but I still wish progression, or how a player was gaining XP, was based more on real life elements like coaching and things like training camp, rather than things like winning awards and statistical performance. So I'm hoping that's where things are headed down the line and headed to in the future. Moving on to the other side of things though, with regression, it only got a little blurb in the blog, but I really liked what I read. It mentions regression being more dynamic, which is absolutely huge. The pretty much static and uniform regression that was in Madden 18 was something that I never liked and that I didn't feel was realistic. And I definitely like that they're factoring in the dev trait into regression as well. And on the surface, everything there sounds really good, but it's, again, that's usually the case with things this time of the year. So it'll be definitely be something to keep an eye on moving forward. And then at the very end of the blog, it mentions the dynamic dev trait, and I'm not really sure how I feel about this yet. There is no more slow, and the dev traits are now broken down into normal, quick, star, and superstar. Superstar is supposed to be something that is extremely rare, which I like, but the thing that I'm most interested to see is the distribution over the other three. Will normal become the new slow, where it wasn't really common, while quick dev makes up the majority of players, or will normal be essentially the same and basically the majority of the players will fall with that dev trait? After that, it talks about players being evaluated at the end of each season and their performance dictating whether or not that trait goes up, down, or stays the same, and that superstar will have to be a league leader to maintain their trait. At first glance, I don't really like this, and it's for the same reasons as progression. Performance is something that can be easily manipulated, and something like this encourages stat chasing, and I just don't like using stats or performance as such a major factor when it comes to something as important as how a player develops. I think that just about covers everything I wanted to get to though. I'm sure as this is rendering, I'll remember another thing that I wanted to talk about, but you guys are usually pretty good at bringing those things up in the comments. But let me know how you feel about skill points, and if after reading the blog you like the sound of it more or less than the old XP system. Also let me know any ways you think that it could be better or could have been better. In the next feature focus, we'll be diving into the additional depth chart positions, so that video might be a little bit shorter than the 3 that I've released previously. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching.